All right, let's dive right into this explainer, and I have to warn you, this one is pure nightmare fuel. Today we're unpacking a really terrifying supernatural event that went down at an isolated medical clinic in Dholikpur village. Now, this isn't your standard medical case study, not at all. It's a raw, chilling story of survival, a deadly curse, and a midnight terror that literally turned a place of healing into a hunting ground. So you might want to turn the lights down low for this one as we unravel exactly what happened in those dark, empty corridors.
I want you to just imagine this for a second. You're lying in a hospital bed. It's pitch black. The clock strikes exactly 12 a.m., and suddenly the dead silence is shattered by, well, pure agony. This was the absolute terrifying reality for two patients, Shankar and Kushin. Every single night, right at midnight, they'd hear these horrific, supernatural sounds echoing through the walls. I mean, they were completely paralyzed with fear, just lying there, listening to some creature in starving torment. And the scariest part? They had absolutely no idea how close they were to the actual source of the nightmare.
Now, here's where the story takes a wildly twisted Jekyll and Hyde turn. By day, Nurse Rajni was this incredibly dedicated, deeply caring professional. She was a healer through and through. But the very second the clock struck midnight, she wasn't a healer anymore. She involuntarily transformed into a monstrous Chudail. Literally, the one person tasked with keeping these patients alive instantly became the absolute greatest threat to their lives.
To really wrap our heads around the stakes here, we have to talk about what a Chudail actually is. Because, look, we aren't just talking about a spooky ghost. This is a shape-shifting, demonic entity from folklore, and it is driven by one thing and one thing only: a completely uncontrollable, ravenous hunger for raw human flesh. Once that curse takes over, all of Nurse Rajni's humanity is just gone. It's totally overwritten by a predator's instinct. It is a wildly dangerous threat to literally anyone in the vicinity.
So, knowing what she turned into, Nurse Rajni actually lived in a constant state of desperate claustrophobia. Every single night, right before that midnight hour hit, she would sprint to an isolated empty hospital room and literally lock herself inside from the outside using a heavy padlock. It's kind of heartbreaking when you think about it, a lonely, tragic sacrifice. Those agonizing sounds the patients were hearing, that was actually the Chudail violently throwing herself against the locked door, trapped, starving, and doing everything she could to break out. That single locked door was literally the only thing keeping the entire hospital safe.
But as we all know, a perfectly functioning system only takes one tiny human error to completely fall apart. Let's break down the timeline. At 11:45 p.m., a new patient named Bablu checks in, and he is completely smitten by Nurse Rajni. He starts heavily flirting with her, which distracts her. By 11:55 p.m., she suddenly realizes the time and absolutely panics, rushing straight to her isolation room. But in that flustered, panicked state right before the transformation kicks in, she forgets the padlock. The door clicks shut, sure, but it is entirely unlocked.
And the tragic irony of this whole thing really boils down to one incredibly careless sentence. When Nurse Rajni was trying to give Bablu his medication, he looked right at her and said, "I would even eat poison from your hands." It was this cheesy, relentless flirting that flustered her, made her lose track of that crucial timeline, and caused her to forget the lock. So, in a very real way, Bablu's careless words literally unleashed the poison into the hospital.
So midnight hits, the transformation takes hold, and those horrific agonized sounds start echoing through the ward again. But Bablu, who is mostly just annoyed that his sleep is being interrupted, makes a truly fatal mistake. He gets out of bed. He thinks it's just the nurse making a racket, so he foolishly wanders down this pitch-black, empty hospital hallway, following those terrible sounds, right up to the room that was supposed to be padlocked. And he pushes the door open. He completely freezes. Because he doesn't lock eyes with the beautiful nurse, he is staring dead at a monstrous Chudail, and she is completely free. She locks right onto him, snarling that she has been starved for days behind that door, and now she is going to eat him raw. Bablu is just rooted to the spot in absolute terror as this entity lunges right at him, kicking off a wildly desperate fight for survival. Somehow, Bablu snaps out of his shock and just sprints down the hallway for his life, bursting back into the patient ward. Shankar sees this absolute monster right on Bablu's heels and violently slams and locks the door. But honestly, it's not even close to enough. The Chudail just starts battering the wood, literally tearing her way into the room. The door is splintering apart, and Shankar, Kishan, and Bablu realize they have exactly one option left. They smash the glass window and leap blindly out of the hospital into the pitch-black night. Now, they've escaped the hospital, but they've plunged deep into a wild, totally unlit jungle. They're injured, they're terrified, and they are being actively hunted by an apex supernatural predator. They manage to find this rotting, abandoned hut and just cower inside in dead silence. Just picture that suffocating claustrophobia for a minute, huddled in the dark, straining to hear every single snapping twig outside, knowing full well this monster is out there sniffing them out.
And of course, she finds them. The Chudail reaches the hut, peering through the broken windows, softly and creepily taunting Bablu to come outside. And this is where the sheer psychological terror just completely shatters their sanity. Shankar, the guy who literally just helped lock the ward door to save Bablu, realizes the entity only wants the man who unlocked her door in the first place. In a moment of pure, panicked self-preservation, Shankar turns to Kishan and whispers this chilling betrayal. They are going to sacrifice Bablu to save themselves.
It immediately turns into absolute chaos inside that tiny hut. Bablu is begging, pleading for his life, screaming, "No, don't do this," but the terror is just too overwhelming. Shankar and Kishan grab him, one by the legs, one by the neck, and they forcefully heave their fellow patient straight out the door. They literally toss him directly into the waiting claws of the starving demon outside. It's such a brutal, dark reminder of what absolute fear can do to human loyalty.
So Bablu hits the dirt, completely defenseless. The Chudail slowly looms over him, entirely victorious at this point. And with a sickeningly sweet, mocking voice, she taunts him. "Babluji, why did you take so long to come out? I have been waiting for you." She's totally savoring this meal she's been waiting for. Bablu just squeezes his eyes shut, bracing for the horrific end.
The monster lunges, her jaws snap down, and then absolutely nothing happens. Bablu opens his eyes, totally confused. Instead of tearing him apart, the Chudail is violently shrieking. She's actually thrown herself backward and is cowering on the jungle floor, absolutely terrified of him. Wait, what just happened? How on earth did the praise suddenly become the one holding all the power here?
Well, it turns out the answer was literally hanging right around his neck the entire time. When Bablu fell out of the hut, a holy amulet, a protective talisman he always wore, spilled out of his shirt. This tiny, sacred object was radiating this blinding power that instantly created an invisible barrier. The demonic entity fundamentally cannot cross it. Bablu suddenly realizes that as long as he's holding this amulet, this invincible monster cannot even touch him. The tables haven't just turned, they've completely shattered. Shankar and Kishan see this absolute miracle happening from the window, and they rush outside, screaming out a desperate improvised plan. They decide to use the amulet's blinding power to actually corner the entity. Bablu slowly inches closer to the cowering demon, raises the holy amulet high, and throws it like a lasso directly over the Chudail's neck. The very second that sacred talisman touches her skin, this violent exorcism begins. The demonic shadow violently detaches from her body and just vanishes into the night air. The monstrous features completely fade away, the claws recede, and lying right there on the jungle floor is a very confused, very human, and fully cured Nurse Rajni. That terrible midnight curse that held her hostage for so long, completely broken. So Nurse Rajni was finally free, and the demonic threat was neutralized for good. But, as you think about all those other isolated, incredibly quiet clinics operating out there in the dead of night, you really have to wonder, how many other terrifying secrets are just waiting behind a single unlocked door? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Make sure you keep the lights on tonight, and I'll see you on the next one.